Hey, it's Juck on a jam-packed Friday. Caden, Dixon, Wyatt, things looking good. That decision on Sunday will go live here, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Athletic Director Ross Bjork, his big mistake last year that irritated Ryan Day. Ryan Day, shots fired against some traitorous coaches. Why Texas is being treated unfairly. And Bill Belichick and UNC are the new Dion in Colorado. Can't miss TV after some more details come out. All that and more. Let's get it. I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championships. The rivalries, it's up there on top of the list, man. And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. Hey, it's your friend Juck. Ryan Day had an interview with Josh Pate, and this interview and the answers in this interview spun me off thinking in several different directions about Ohio State football, and we're going to riff on several of those today. But I want to say right off the rip, the longer Ryan Day has been on the job, the more he has opened up, which is really cool. When I first started this show 15 months ago, one of the themes that I used to hit on about Ryan Day was just how good he was at taking a question and given a 3-minute answer on that question that was so good and so thorough that I would find myself 90 seconds in nodding my head and then think back, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with the question that was asked. He was just so good at talking about what he wanted to talk about, not what you were asking, that you just totally forgot he wasn't answering the question. And he's changed a lot recently. The transparency is maybe more than any college football coach that there is. I mean, he is letting us know things that he never used to let us know. And we can look recently with the defensive line. 3 times throughout the spring, being brutally honest about the defensive line. Talked about it again just in his press conference on Tuesday. These are things we're not hearing from other coaches in this era. Talking about the transfer portal and how irritated he was about that. Talking about the walk-ons and how he had to tell the walk-ons that, you know, they might not have a roster spot for them in the numbers and in the NCAA stuff. Like, he's mixing it up and putting things out there because he knows he's obviously a big voice in college football now. He's the top dog in the Big Ten. He's the top dog in the country per some people's rankings of college football coaches, mine included. We'll get to that in a minute. But he went in several different areas with Josh Pate, and I thought so much of it was so revealing about a lot of different things. But the thing that obviously is the headline of this video, and the thing that, I don't want to say the biggest takeaway from it. I think there were some more interesting things, but it's certainly interesting when you hear a head coach say something like Ryan Day said in regards to, we can assume, Jim Knowles and Tony AlFraud. So Jim Knowles obviously leaves to Penn State after the national championship, does not come to the celebration. Folks say he was not invited. His girlfriend claims he was not invited. No, he shouldn't be invited. He signed a contract and then he tried to leverage it for more money. And Ohio State offered him more money and he said, no, that's not enough. It's clear he was uncomfortable. He wanted to leave. Okay, leave. He chose to go to Penn State. His girlfriend claims he was mistreated, didn't like the head coach breathing down his neck or checking on him. And whatever, that's fine. He's gone. He never made a public statement to the players, to the fans. He just bounced to a rival. And as an Ohio State fan, that hits personally to me. And that game against Penn State this year is going to mean so much more to me, probably to you too. When that offense for Ohio State goes against that Penn State defense, I mean, that has some extra oomph now. Particularly now that Penn State has so much hype around them. We're talking about them as the number 1 team in the JUCK on Bucks post-spring top 25 after all, which none of you watched. I put 6 hours into that show yesterday, 6 hours, and it got 1/5 of the views of my regular videos. That really was disappointing. Anyway, disappointed in you guys. Very proud of Ryan Day. But listen, I know you're Buckeye fans. You got to know everything about the competition because it's not just about how good you are. It's about how good everybody else is. But anyway, Penn State number 1 in those rankings. And Jim Knowles doesn't really have anything to do with it. Whether or not they had Jim Knowles or Allen, like they're my number 1 team. But we took that a little personal, the way Jim Knowles did that. I certainly did. Then you got the Tony AlFraud situation. Tony AlFraud, longtime Ohio State coach. After the 2023 season, everybody on the staff basically got a contract extension except for Tony AlFraud. Tony, an Ohio guy, born in my city of Akron, Ohio, felt like he deserved better, and he chose to leave after spring had started. Spring practice is going on. Tony chooses to leave. Leaves Ohio State in a bit of a lurch at that point. And he chose to go to the arch rival. Now, the previous year, had Tony wanted to leave, he had Miami sniffing around, he had Notre Dame sniffing around, and he chose to stay put. This is a guy with a resume that could pretty much get him hired anywhere in the country. And he goes up there, and then he chooses to kind of rub it in to Ohio State fans, engaging on Twitter and such. I'm a firm believer that position coaches really shouldn't be at one place too incredibly long. I think complacency starts to set in, and I think we all saw that with Tony AlFraud. We saw consistent recruiting misses. We saw, similar to Justin Fry, that the board was really small for him, and he didn't have backup plans when he missed out on top guys. And it felt like Tony's time at Ohio State was coming to an end. It was wrapping up. So I got no problem with him leaving. I got a problem with the way he left and where he went. You know, you got a guy who's from Ohio, and when we get these kids in from out of state at both programs, Ohio State, Michigan, they come in from out of state, and you teach them about the rivalry, and you talk about everything we hate about them and how real it is and what it really means. And then you got a guy like AlFraud who chooses to pick up, screw his team in the middle of spring and go to the rival. And it tells those kids at both schools that you're really just feeding them a line of crap. It doesn't really mean anything to you. And he did that to the rivalry. He embarrassed my city. He embarrassed our state, and he will forever be Tony AlFraud at JUCK Studios. And I think Ryan Day agrees with me. And he publicly blasted both of them. Here's what Ryan Day had to say to Pate.
Profession you're in, when you're talking about coaches, because you're not the only one who's dealt with this, but I've watched you go to battle with guys in conference play and then lose staffers to conference rivals. And so you could look at that competitively and say, like, that eats at me. That's how I would look at it. But then I would also hope that I could turn that spigot off or compartmentalize and look at the professional side and say, there are several layers to this. How important is that, obviously, for you to be able to do?
Yeah, and I think now when you're dealing with the money that's out there, you have to start to take a step back and do what you just said, because there's just decisions that have to be made, and we all get it. But there's a competitive side to it, sure. I mean, that's still in play, but I think even in the last 5 years, you're just seeing the amount of money, even for assistant coaches and coordinators, change a lot, and so decisions have to be made, and guys got to do what's best for their families and things like that. So you understand that part of it, but there's also like your loyalty and things like that, and you only have one name, and your character, and so there's this constant battle of that. I would say that's accurate, but
loyalty, character, you only got one name. I love that line. I've never heard it. I'm going to say it to my kids tonight. That's animosity. That is animosity with at least one or both of those guys. I'd love to know which one more, right? Who's got more animosity going towards them from Ryan Day? Props to Pate for getting that answer. That was fantastic. And I cannot believe that Ryan Day said that publicly. I really can't. It just doesn't, like, if you'd have said this to me, that he said that 2 years ago, I'd have laughed. Like, there's no chance even if he felt that way, that he would publicly say that. Ryan Day is out here talking like a Buckeye fan, right? I mean, I love it. We look at these guys as what they are, right? They're professionals. There are a lot of things that go into the decisions they make, just like our decisions in our careers. And I know some of you are strictly business when you look at these things. And I know that because, when I talk about AlFraud when that first happened, or Knowles when that first happened, like, this is a business. I don't care. They don't look at this like us. And I agree, but I want them to. And when I hear Ryan Day say something like that, like he does. This is personal, man. And the fact that they went to rivals is personal, and I love it so much. I look back at the Wisconsin comment I got from a guy the other day, Wisconsin guy, and he says, I don't understand why Ohio State and Michigan people hate each other so much. And from my point of view, it's more Ohio people hating them. And I think he's probably right. But, life's too short or something like that. And my response to him was like, this is part of the fun of college football. Like, I love the hate. I'm just as likely to watch a Scum or Miami or USC game because I hate them as I am to watch teams that I kind of, loosely rooted for here and there, like in the Big 12 or like Syracuse in the Big East or Kansas State, like teams that I kind of loosely rooted for here and there. I'm just as likely to watch, probably more likely, a team that I hate and root against them. The hate is beautiful. I love the hate. But when you got these people in the profession, you don't ever think that they're actually thinking like that. They're just putting themselves in the best position that they can financially for their future. And, you try to understand that. But for Ryan Day to come out and say that is just beautiful. But when we look at the Big Ten now, when we look at the rivalry with Penn State being what it is, Penn State coming in this massive year of expectations with Knowles, then you look at Oregon. You look at the stunt that Dan Lanning pulled at the end of the game at Autzen and the little smirk on his little media tour afterwards, talking about how much they prepare situationally, the 12 men on the field thing I'm talking about. And then Ohio State and Ryan Day just smashing them back when it mattered most. There's certainly a little something going there. They crash on the recruiting trail nonstop. You look at Sharon Moore, and now he can claim that he has 2 wins over Ryan Day. He comes to Columbus. He shoots that arrow on the field, which really pissed me off. The Big Ten has never been this exciting, and I mean never. You go over to Illinois with Brett Bielema and what he's doing over at Illinois. You got Luke Fickell, maybe about to flame out at Wisconsin, what Matt Rule's doing at Nebraska. And, of course, you've got Lincoln Riley and USC out there. He's trying to build a monster. They're spending a ton of money. The Big Ten is so exciting, and it used to be so boring. It used to be so boring. And it was just like overnight, this has become so dramatic. And this is honestly like why I always liked the SEC, because the SEC just had dramatic storylines. Forget the football, but just dramatic storylines. They'd hire the big name coaches, the Hugh Freezes and the guys like this that are just retread like horrible human beings. But the Big Ten is now as exciting as it gets in college football. Speaking of which, when we talk about that Ohio State-Penn State game, Ohio State hosting Penn State this year. Now, should Ohio State be able to get through Texas in game number 1, and that very well might be a number 1 versus number 2 matchup, at the very worst, a number 1 versus number 3 matchup. The only other team that might be at 1 or 2 ahead of either of those two, Texas or Ohio State, is Penn State, in my opinion, when the official AP poll comes out. So we're talking about potentially a top 3 matchup 2 times. If Ohio State beats Texas, that Ohio State-Penn State game in Columbus also will be a top 3 matchup. Both of them could be top 2 matchups. We could have 2 top 1 versus 2 matchups in the country at home this year. 2 of them. And both of them will be at noon. You believe that, man? It's just crazy. It's crazy. But yeah, the home slate looking nice. We're going to have to get to those games, guys. Now, of all the high schools in the United States of America, this also happened in that interview.
Which is what it's supposed to look like when you're doing it the right way. But if I'm like a senior at Rancho Cucamonga High School right now in California, I didn't grow up knowing much about Ohio State. I'm not immersed in that culture.
You should have, because it's C.J. Stroud's high school.
Well, that's true. That is true.
Every high school in America, and he just happens to choose C.J. Stroud's high school. What are the odds of that? Now, I thought that might be a setup, and I asked him, and he said no. He's actually uses that as a, that's his like backup name for a high school because he loves the name. Not a setup, total coincidence. And I think that's pretty awesome. All right, let's get to Ross. Ross Bjork, a guy who has never met a microphone he didn't want to talk into, was probably on the job at Ohio State for maybe 3 weeks as the Ohio State athletic director when he decided to come out and tell Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports that Ohio State spent probably $20 million on NIL at the time. Now, people had been talking about Ohio State spending $13 million, and that was a shocking figure. Of course, that $13 million figure was a Ryan Day quote from 2022 in June when he was talking about how much it would cost to retain the roster. And people were using that figure and attributing it to the 2024 transfer portal class when Quinshawn and Caleb and the guys came in. But when Ross Bjork came out and said that, I was absolutely furious. I was just furious because I knew immediately that this story about that $20 million was going to go national, outside of college football, cross over to people who don't follow college football, as this is what the state of college football is now, because we'd never heard anything like that, never heard a figure like that. And I knew that that figure would be used to diminish Ohio State's accomplishments, that they were trying to purchase a national championship, that they were the program going rogue, bringing in a pile of transfers. Never mind that they brought in 8 total transfers. Out of 134 teams, they were ranked in the hundreds for fewest players brought in. Never mind that we know that money was spent on retaining 12 of those guys who just went to the NFL. Nobody follows those things. They just heard the $20 million, and it was a shocking figure. And of course, they never heard the correction or the explanation. That didn't matter. And everything I posted for the first half of the season, little clips I post from the show on social media platforms, the comments from other fans underneath, $20 million, buying a championship, trying to buy a roster, trying to preemptively diminish what this team could accomplish. And every time I saw it, I just got red-faced about Ross Bjork's idiocy in that moment. Nobody gives out these numbers. NIL numbers aren't reported. And I think Ross really stuck his foot in his mouth here. Dispersed the Buckeyes football players around $20 million this past year, said Ross Bjork. In all likelihood, that figure ranks first in America. In all likelihood. Note, Texas, Texas A&M, Oregon, Miami, nobody else sharing this information. So our guy comes out and offers it up. Only ones in college football who've done this. The most high-profile brand in all of college football. Nobody else is putting numbers out there like this. And to the casual fan, these numbers seem absolutely insane and make it sound as though Ohio State is in a league of its own, this big behemoth program gone rogue, buying a roster. So all offseason, all we heard was how the Buckeyes loaded up. They loaded up in the transfer portal. And this $20 million figure is now being used already, just hours after, as a way to discredit this team, his team, and the accomplishments of his head coach. And I don't like it one bit. And I don't know why Ross did it. And at the time I came on here, I was obviously irritated. I did a long episode about it. And we knew at the time, surely there were other schools spending just as much. It doesn't take a genius to see who's spending the most. We can see it in their player acquisition. But all season long, all we had to listen to was Ohio State and the $20 million roster. Then, towards the end of the season, we start to see a bunch of these phony graphics come out about who's spending what in NIL. Now, those stupid phony graphics full of made-up data that were attributed to absolutely nobody floated around the internet, floated around Twitter, and, it was now not Ohio State at the top, but, right in the top group with the ones that we can all see spend the most money, Texas and Oregon, Notre Dame and Ohio State, Texas A&M, Miami. Like, the lists were all fabricated. Some of those numbers were based on what some sources had said, but it was all total speculation, and very few of them attributed to any reputable source. But people were passing them around like they were fact. And then it was, oh, look, Ohio State not all on their own. Nobody gives out NIL information. You don't give out your personal finances. I don't either. NIL collectives don't have to. That's not a requirement, so they don't. Nobody except Ohio State. And Ryan Day told Pate how much this bothered him clearly. Not specifically that Ross Bjork gave out the number, but how much the number being out there in this narrative bothered him.
That executed and did it the same way it's always been done.
Yeah, I think that's where, it's just easy for people to say, well, Ohio State had NIL for this amount of money or whatever that is, and it's just so cheap and so easy for someone to say. If you actually do the research, and all it does is really tell you the value of an Ohio State football player. I mean, when you look at a brand that has, just south of 12 million fans in the city of Columbus with 2 million people and the power of Ohio State, yeah, our guys are going to make a lot of money in NIL. And the truth is, the majority of those guys were all guys that decided to come back, who were already on the team that we've recruited and developed. We did add 6 or 7 guys, but not 15, not 20, where we went out there and just went and got the best players in college football. That wasn't the case. And that's not what won us a championship. I think it's just easy for people just to kind of say that, and just because it's easy and it's cheap. But when you really do your research and you look through it, like, all of these guys had been here multiple years. You just look at the front, you look at JT and Jack and Tyleek and Cody Simon and Lathan Ransom and Denzel Burke, and you go through Donovan Jackson and Emeka Buka. You start going through these guys. Didn't just sure, Quinshawn and Will were big additions for us. But Travion has been here since his freshman year. When Coach Saban retired and we had an opportunity to pick up Caleb and then Julian and Seth McLaughlin, like that kind of happened opportunistically. But by the way, Seth, struggled a little bit before he got here, with the snaps and things like that, and he won the Remington Award here. So I'm pretty defensive of that, because these guys who came through here and have scars. I mean, you don't always remember the wins until you win championships. You remember the losses around here. And these guys have some scars along the way, and that's what kept them together throughout the entire road. And so, yeah, I never really got into that or addressed that, but, our guys hear that over and over again, and people around the building with these high expectations, and we're just throwing out numbers like that. But that really didn't affect us in the end, because we knew that wasn't the case. It wasn't like we just had the best players money could buy, if anyone actually did the research.
Well, now we're seeing the same thing with Texas. Texas getting the Buckeye treatment from last year, and you've probably heard about it, the $40 million roster at Texas. On Wednesday, a report came out from the Houston Chronicle, and in that report, a source close to, an anonymous source, tells the Houston Chronicle, which is a reputable paper, right? Paper. It's a reputable source. It's not some one-off. That Texas will be spending between $35 and $40 million in NIL. Okay. What exactly does that mean? Well, what the guy's claiming here is Texas is spending $20 million from their NIL foundation, and then he's adding on the 20.5 revenue sharing onto that number. The $20.5 million has not been allocated to anything. It won't be going to football exclusively. It'll be spread out among sports. The bulk of it will go to football. But everybody is going to have this added on, that $25 million onto their figure. So everybody's known this has been coming for a while, that it was going to be harder to do pay for play. And everybody has been spending a little more money here in this last pretty much hurrah for pay for play. We look at Texas Tech and their ridiculous expenditure. Like, everybody knows that this is coming, and everybody's beefing up contracts right now. So everybody's NIL right now will be inflated, and we can take that 20.5 and add it onto all the schools that are going to participate at the highest level, which are most of the schools we talk about on the show. Everybody's NIL is essentially doubling with that 20.5. But Texas was singled out here because of this anonymous source who basically Ross Bjorked Texas. He Ross Bjorked Texas. Texas is spending the same money in NIL as Texas A&M, as Miami, as Ohio State, as Oregon. They're all in the same bubble. But nobody's going to hear that this guy was factoring in the 20.5 in revenue sharing, which is not even all going to be spent on football. They're only going to hear that $40 million. And the truth is, this is very much an Ohio State situation from last year. Like, when we look at Texas, They run that program extremely similar to Ohio State. Texas this year brought in 10 transfers. They've been in the news a lot because they brought in 5 defensive linemen. Of those 10 transfers, 3 of them were kickers. Well, 2 kickers and a punter. So 7 total transfer position players is what Texas brought in this year. They're not out there pounding the transfer portal. That's not what they're doing. Their money, like Ohio State's last year, going on retaining their players. So it doesn't matter what the facts are. The article came out, and that's what they're going to be labeled with. And hey, it's Texas. I don't give a shit. But, as long as you guys know, gobbledygook, they're not out doubling everybody else. That's not what's happening here. Now, something I hit on a couple months ago when I was making the case for Ryan Day currently being the number 1 head coach in college football, which some people just can't wrap their heads around because it's very simple to say Kirby 2, Ryan 1, therefore Kirby better. That's real simple, cut and dry. But these conversations are nuanced. Day said in this interview that when you win a national championship, you get the benefit of the doubt. And when we've seen someone go through the kind of adversity that Day has and then come home with the trophy, there is a certain level of trust that the general public now feels for that coach that didn't exist before, even though same coach both before and after that national championship game. But our perception now as a general public is he's now done it. He's now won the big one. He compiled a list of top 10 or top 5 wins that is kind of unparalleled in one season. And now he gets the benefit of the doubt. And my argument for him being the current number 1 head coach in college football right now is that now you get to go back and instead of looking at all those close calls with exasperation like we used to at this time last year, they now become accomplishments. Ryan Day didn't go out and get blown out of a national championship game. That's not what we say now. Now it's Ryan Day won a national championship and he's made 2 national championship game appearances. Almost 3. A couple of plays and a kick away from almost 3 national championship appearances in 6 years. A couple of plays and a kick away from almost 2 national championship wins and 3 national championship appearances in 6 years. The way we speak about it now, very different when you cash it in. And it goes that way for every head coach. It's depressing until you cash it in, until you kick in that door. But once you do, those near misses now become accomplishments. And those close calls just show a guy who consistently gets his program in position to win national championships. Now you get to go back and look at that astonishing winning percentage. Now it means so much more that he's a national champion. And when you compare him to Kirby Smart, who, look, total honesty, I love Kirby Smart, the college football coach. I'm not shy in telling you the ones that I hate. I think he's fantastic. What's the difference between Smart, other than he's been around longer? Well, we look at the not so good for Kirby Smart. We can look at Alabama, who has owned Kirby Smart. That's not their biggest rival. That's not their Michigan, but it is their nemesis. It's their biggest foe, has been in the SEC. Ryan Day got himself a similar problem with his rival. What's the difference in their overall accomplishments? Both of them won a national championship in year 6. Kirby Smart now has 2. Kirby Smart also has a tremendous advantage in the state of Georgia when it comes to recruiting. But what separates these two guys? On a piece of paper, it's a national championship. It's 1. Kirby has 1 more. Now, I'm never going to say that Ohio State-Georgia game came down to a kick. I think that's simplifying it because I think that in that situation, that distance of kick with a college kicker, the odds of that kick going in are, 15%. And while it's true that it did come down to a kick, I think to make that more of a coin flip, you need another 10 yards. So a couple of plays and a kick is kind of how I word it. But in my mind, you are a couple of plays and a kick from Ryan Day being the one that has 2 national championships and Kirby being the one that has 1. Would they be different coaches if it went that way? Would they be different? No, they wouldn't be different. Even if Ryan Day had the 2 national championships and Kirby had the 1, they would not be different coaches. But I'm talking about right now. Ohio State in 2024 was the better program than Georgia. There's no doubt about that, right? Ohio State in 2025, right now, I believe is the better program than Georgia. The Las Vegas odds believe the better program than Georgia. When we look at these rosters, why would Ohio State be the better program than Georgia? Ohio State bringing in Julian Sayin. Georgia's got, a veteran who's been with the program forever. Obviously, both programs got talent. Both got great coaching staffs. Ohio State switching over both coordinators. Georgia's not. So Ohio State switching over both coordinators, a quarterback who's never played, questions on the defensive line similar for both programs. But Ohio State, the favorite, per the Vegas odds. And that's because Ohio State now gets the benefit of the doubt because Ohio State is now considered the premier program in college football. And Ryan Day is currently the best head coach in college football. That's just what it is. I'm sorry. It's true. When we talk about that benefit of the doubt, and I'll just keep going back to this because it blows my mind, the general reaction from the public to the Matt Patricia hire. Like, it was such backlash, and so way more than half of Ohio State fans furious with that hire. And it blew my mind. Right after a national championship, the guy who's prioritized culture over everything else, and everybody thought that he was going to bring in some jerk that was going to irritate everybody. But I'll tell you this, Matt Patricia, when we listen to the quotes of the guys on the recruiting trail in the class of 2026, they're all bringing up Matt Patricia, how excited they are to talk to him, how much they liked him, how excited they are about his NFL experience, his Super Bowls, how they're going to, how he's going to utilize people. Matt Patricia is a serious asset in recruiting in a way Jim Knowles never was. He's knee deep in it too. Like, seriously, all out effort. And I love that. I didn't think that's the way it was going to be. Certainly, no, I don't think anybody did, right? Last college experience was 20 years ago at Syracuse. He's never been in a situation like this, but he seems to be eating it up. Man, that's just a guy happy with life right now. I love the way this is going on the defense. I can't wait. I'm so excited to see what he does. I think it's just going to be so much fun. All right, on to my favorite story of the week, the Bill Belichick situation. Now, Hard Knocks was going to follow North Carolina this year, and I was pumped. Couldn't wait to see that. That's before this girlfriend thing came into the equation. I just wanted to see the football aspect of it. And then I was really disappointed when it got canceled. It was announced it was going to happen, and then it was canceled. Turns out Bill Belichick is the one that reached out to them. He wanted to do it, which was crazy. Doesn't sound like him, but then, all right, he wants to promote the program. All right, I get it. So then we find out no dice. Well, now we have found out the reason it didn't happen is because of this girlfriend. This girlfriend was trying to interject herself into the HBO production of this. She wanted to be involved. They clearly felt uncomfortable with some 24-year-old girl being involved. She's so cocky, man. It's so funny. And they said, no, thanks. We talked about the situation with the interview the other day. Well, on Tuesday, said girlfriend, Jordan something or other, releases an email that Bill Belichick sent to his publicist. Now, apparently, this email, and I don't know why she released this email, but this email was basically talking to the publicist and saying that, he was very irritated with the way the media was covering things, and that CBS was supposed to only ask him in that atrocious interview about the book. And I said to myself, what book? I didn't even know they were promoting a book. Now, when she was in the corner saying, we're not talking about this, she was apparently saying, according to Bill Belichick, that they were not talking about their relationship or any personal specifics at all. They were there to do the book. So she didn't mean to come across as saying, we're not talking about our relationship specifically, but we're not talking about any personal life at all. That makes sense to me. That actually makes sense to me. I think that I can probably understand where they're coming from, and maybe it doesn't look quite as bad as far as the relationship thing goes from that standpoint. But I had no idea that there was a book. And the reason I had no idea is because that clip that I played here on the show was released by CBS. CBS released that clip. They didn't release anything about a book, so they took this and made this dramatic. Now, certainly this is a wild story for sure. She did storm out of there at one point, but if they kept asking about personal questions, and she is essentially his publicist now, I can see where she's irritated, but here's where this gets even funnier. Bill Belichick obviously hired his son, Steve Belichick, who was the defensive coordinator at Washington last year, did a really good job, deserves the job, right? He's not, you can call it a nepotism hire, but like he's actually at a better program right now, in my opinion. It was at Washington than UNC. So he kind of downgraded, in my opinion. So he goes to UNC, and the 24-year-old was talking to the social media team at North Carolina about how they should be, putting this out there to avoid the nepotism stuff that, Steve learned under the greatest defensive coach of all time, and he deserves this job, etc. It turns out that Steve Belichick's wife doesn't seem like she's a fan of her father-in-law's new girlfriend. So there was a comedian, and this comedian writes something about this Jordan and says she's clearly acting as his publicist, which she basically is. And then Steve Belichick's wife says, publicists act in a professional manner and don't storm off delaying an interview. So now this has become a family rift gone public. This is great. I am so excited for this season. I am so excited for North Carolina. I don't see any way that this is going to be anything but a disaster, an absolute disaster. Then it leaks out that this girl, not only with Belichick 50 years older than her, but her last boyfriend looks like this. And this last boyfriend says that she dumped him when Belichick came into the picture. Look, I don't like to pass judgment on people, but I do all the time. This is a weird woman, man. This is a weird young lady. And she either has incredibly odd taste in men, which, hey, look, I got a smoking hot wife. I understand how that goes. But, or she's out for financial gain. One of the two. One of those two things is the thing. And again, Caden Dixon-Wyatt, Jeremiah Smith, Caden Dixon-Wyatt said he was announcing his decision on Sunday, and I told you we're going to go live here for that show. But JJ retweeted that and put the this emoji on it, right? Is JJ telling us something? He just might be. At any rate, we'll be here Sunday live. Let's pack the house. We can talk about whatever we want, but we'll be live for Caden Dixon-Wyatt's decision. Guys, another huge day here at JUCK on Bucks. We're cooking with gas, man. We're cooking with gas. I appreciate you guys so much. Please like today's video, and please do subscribe if you haven't already. We're having a blast. We're loving life. It's great to be a Buckeye. Talk to you tomorrow. JUCK on Bucks out.